Right now, you probably think of yourself as a good person. You try to help others, stay true to your values, and avoid causing harm. You're not like those people from history who stood by while atrocities unfolded, or worse, played a role in them. That's not you, right? But decades of psychological research suggest something uncomfortable. The line between good and complicit is thinner than we like to believe. This isn't about blaming or attacking anyone's character. It's a warning, a wake-up call. Because the truth is, ordinary people, people just like us, routinely become part of systems that harm others. And they don't always realize it's happening. So the real question isn't, am I a good person? The real question is, do I understand the psychological forces that can turn good intentions into harmful behavior? And maybe more importantly, am I prepared to resist them? We love telling ourselves this neat little story. Evil is done by evil people. Since I'm not evil, I'm safe. But that's not just naive. That kind of thinking is exactly what lets harm spread without resistance. Take Hannah Arendt, for example. After World War II, she observed something deeply disturbing during the Eichmann trials. The man who helped organize the Holocaust. He wasn't a snarling monster. He was a mild-mannered bureaucrat, a family man, a music lover, someone who probably held the door open for strangers. She called this the banality of evil. Her point wasn't that evil is boring. It's that most evil is carried out by people who never consciously choose to be evil. They just don't choose anything at all. They follow orders. They go with the flow. They stop thinking. Modern psychology has confirmed this again and again. We tend to rate ourselves as more ethical than the average person. This is called the better-than-average effect. We see ourselves as the heroes of our own stories, so we naturally justify our own actions, even when we'd harshly judge someone else for doing the same thing. But here's the twist. Some people don't go along with the system. Some people do resist. So what makes them different? Why did someone like Irina Sendler risk her life to smuggle Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto, while so many others stayed silent? Why did Karen Silkwood blow the whistle on dangerous nuclear practices, knowing the company would come after her? What made those people say no when everyone else complied? Research into moral courage has found some common threads. First, these people had a strong sense of personal values that didn't depend on what others thought of them. Second, they had practiced taking responsibility in small situations, long before the high-stakes moments arrived. And third, and this is huge, they didn't see themselves as powerless. Even inside massive, impersonal systems, they believed they could still make a difference. The danger isn't evil people. It's good people who stop questioning their actions because they've convinced themselves that being good is automatic, that once you're a good person, you don't have to keep proving it. You can stop paying attention. Let's go back to 1961. Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most disturbing psychological experiments in modern history. He asked ordinary people to administer electric shocks to a stranger whenever they gave the wrong answer to a question. They were told it was for science. The man they were shocking wasn't actually getting hurt, it was an actor, but the participants didn't know that. And what happened? Most people, 65% of them, went all the way. They delivered what they believed were fatal shocks, just because a man in a lab coat said, "Please continue." Let that sink in. But not everyone went along. The ones who resisted were different in a very specific way. They didn't automatically trust the authority figure. They questioned the setup. They refused to surrender responsibility for their actions, even under pressure. They had drawn personal lines and practiced standing by them. This tells us something critical. Systems don't need monsters, they just need structure. A process, a script, something that makes participation feel normal or even necessary. In the Milgram experiment, it was the lab coat. In modern life, it's usually a company policy, a job description, an "it's out of my hands" mentality. And the thing is, Today's systems are even more sophisticated. They're designed to feel invisible. Think about the software engineer who realizes their algorithm is promoting outrage and misinformation, but stays quiet because, well, that's not my department. Or the financial advisor selling products they know are bad for clients, but hey, I'm just following company policy. Or the factory supervisor who sees safety violations every day, but shrugs it off because I don't make the rules. Same psychological mechanics. You've got a role, an authority figure, a system that creates just enough distance from the consequences to make it feel acceptable. But every single one of those situations still includes a person who could choose differently. You are in one of those situations right now. Your job, your online life, your social world, they're shaping your decisions every single day. The question is, are you aware of that? Are you actively choosing your actions, or just floating downstream? Here's one of the hardest truths about being human. Responsibility is terrifying. Making moral choices, standing alone, knowing others might disagree or judge you, that's scary. It's emotionally exhausting. It can even be dangerous. So what do we do instead? We let the system decide for us. We say, I was just doing my job. That's not my department. I don't make the rules. And it feels safe, like we've dodged the emotional weight of responsibility. But what we've really done is something Hannah Arendt warned us about. We've become thoughtless, not careless, not stupid. Thoughtless, in the literal sense of not thinking, not asking, is this right? Or, what are the consequences? We've handed our moral agency over to someone else. Psychologists have a name for this too. Diffusion of responsibility. And modern systems are built to encourage it. Think about it. Big corporations are structured to make sure no one feels individually accountable. On social media, we're so far removed from the people affected by our actions that we often forget they're real. Bureaucracies make harmful decisions feel like the inevitable output of a machine. No one flipped the switch. The system just worked the way it was designed. Take pharmaceutical pricing. No one person at a big pharma company sits in a room and says, let's let people die because they can't afford insulin. That's not how it happens. Instead, you've got executives optimizing shareholder value, researchers focused on the science, marketing teams promoting benefits, regulators following protocols. Each person is just playing their part. The system itself creates the harm, and everyone within it gets to say, I was just doing my job. But here's the thing. Some people in those systems choose a different path. Some employees speak up. Some researchers refuse to hide negative findings. Some regulators put public health above their career prospects. What's the difference? It's not the system. It's the individual's decision to hold on to moral responsibility, even when the structure says, don't worry, we've got that handled. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you accepted full responsibility for a hard choice? When was the last time you stood by your principles, even when it was inconvenient or uncomfortable? Here's a scenario to think about. You're in a crowded building. Suddenly, the fire alarm blares. You smell smoke, but you can't see flames. Some people are heading to the exits. Others are hesitating, looking around, waiting to see what everyone else does. Now, ask yourself, who are you going to follow? Odds are, it'll be whoever seems most confident, most certain. The person who acts like they know what's happening. That instinct? It's powerful, and it explains how authority works, not through brute force, but by offering certainty in a confusing world. Friedrich Nietzsche called this the herd instinct, our tendency to surrender individual judgment to the group, especially when we're unsure or overwhelmed. And this isn't just theory. Psychologist Solomon Asch ran an experiment that shows just how deep this instinct goes. Participants were shown a reference line and asked to pick the matching line from a group of 3. On their own, people almost never got it wrong. The task was that simple. But when they were surrounded by others, actually actors, giving the wrong answer, Something clearly obviously wrong. 75% of participants went along at least once. They chose to conform, to avoid standing out, rather than trust their own eyes. We do this all the time. In times of crisis, whether economic, corporate, or cultural, we gravitate toward the loudest, most confident voices. Not necessarily the most honest ones. Not the wisest, just the most certain. Look back at the 2008 financial crisis. Mortgage brokers, investment bankers, ratings agencies, tons of people knew something was off. They sensed the system was shaky. But no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. So they looked around, saw that others were still playing the game, and kept quiet. They weren't evil. They were scared. They were uncertain. And they followed whoever seemed to have answers. That's the danger. Not just the existence of bad actors, but the fact that most of us, when faced with uncertainty, will grab onto any authority figure who seems sure of themselves, no matter how wrong they might be. So let me ask again, how often do you question the confident voices in your life? How comfortable are you with uncertainty, with not having all the answers, with trusting your own judgment, even when others disagree? Because that is where real resistance begins. And here's another place it hides: language. Language doesn't just communicate ideas, it shapes them, it disguises them. Sometimes it even sanitizes them. Evil rarely announces itself directly. It wraps itself in professional jargon, in sanitized terms that make harmful actions feel normal. Nazi officials didn't say they were murdering people. They talked about evacuation and resettlement. It wasn't genocide, it was a logistical operation. Words became camouflage, and that same camouflage exists today. Tech companies don't manipulate users, they optimize engagement. Governments don't spy on citizens, they conduct national security surveillance. Defense contractors aren't profiting from war. They offer strategic solutions. Strip away the euphemisms and ask yourself, what's really happening? What are we actually doing? Who benefits? Who suffers? Because when you remove the moral disguise, you see the system for what it is. And then you can start to ask a much harder question. What role am I playing in this? Here's how it usually starts. Not with a big betrayal, not with some dramatic villainous choice, but with something small. A tiny compromise. A little white lie to smooth things over. A decision that feels like just this once. A shortcut you tell yourself is harmless. But these small acts, when left unchecked, become the foundation for something much bigger. Psychologists call this the foot-in-the-door effect. The idea is simple. Once you agree to a small request, you're more likely to agree to a larger one later, and then a larger one after that. Each step feels justifiable because, well, it's only slightly worse than the last. This is where cognitive dissonance kicks in. When our actions start to conflict with our self-image, we feel internal discomfort. To resolve that, we either change our behavior or we change our beliefs to match the behavior. And unfortunately, changing beliefs often feels easier. Think about how corporate scandals usually unfold. It rarely starts with someone deciding to defraud investors or steal millions. It starts with a manager who pads some numbers on an expense report. Just this once. Just for this quarter. Everyone does it. It's fine. Next quarter, the same thing happens. And this time, it feels normal. Eventually, that same manager might be running full-blown scams, things they never would have imagined themselves doing years earlier. The Theranos scandal is a perfect example. Elizabeth Holmes likely didn't wake up one day thinking, I'm going to lie to patients and investors and build a company on deception. More likely, it started with small exaggerations about early tech progress. A few claims that were optimistic rather than accurate. But each step deeper made it harder to backtrack. One small lie required a bigger one to cover it up. But not everyone at Theranos went along. Some employees, scientists, engineers refused to fudge data. Even early on, they drew a line. They said, no. And because of that, They protected themselves from the snowball of complicity that followed. This isn't just about whistleblowing. It's about recognizing the pattern before it gets out of control. That's where moral boundaries come in. Some people make a conscious choice to set clear ethical lines they won't cross, no matter the pressure. I will never lie to protect my employer from legitimate criticism. I will never ignore safety violations. I will never prioritize profit over a patient's well-being. These aren't things you want to be figuring out in the moment, because when the heat is on and you're tired and someone's breathing down your neck, that is not the time to start defining your values. You have to decide before you're tested. Write them down. Share them with someone you trust. Ask them to remind you when you start rationalizing your behavior. Think about your life right now. What small compromises are you making? What habits are you forming? What kind of precedent are you setting? Because every small decision is shaping the kind of person you're becoming. And here's the most dangerous part. Sometimes, complicity feels righteous. Sometimes, we participate in harmful systems believing we're fighting for justice, protecting the vulnerable, defending the truth. That's when things get especially dangerous, because when you're absolutely certain you're right, when your cause feels sacred, when you've labeled someone else as the enemy, you become capable of justifying nearly anything. This is the dynamic Friedrich Nietzsche warned about. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. And if that wasn't chilling enough, he added something even more profound. Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. Let that sink in. Because once you're sure your cause is righteous, it becomes dangerously easy to overlook the harm your methods cause. Social identity theory helps explain this. We define ourselves partly by the groups we belong to. And we naturally start seeing our group as better, more moral, more deserving. This creates in-group favoritism, and often, out-group hostility. That's how people start dehumanizing others. That's how justice movements can become oppressive. That's how systems meant to uplift can end up doing harm. This isn't just historical. It happens right now, in modern systems, through something called moral licensing. It's when people act less ethically because they feel they've already proven they're one of the good ones. The environmentalist who flies all over the world for conferences, the social justice advocate who shuts down opposing voices, the diversity officer who ignores discrimination in their own department. They all believe in their cause. But that belief becomes a shield, a justification. Even companies fall into this. Look at some wellness brands. Their mission? Help people be healthy, whole, and happy. Sounds great. But their business model, often built on making customers feel like they're never enough, that they always need one more product, one more fix. The goal might be noble, but the execution feeds on insecurity. This is why some of the most harmful systems in history were run by people who truly believed in their mission. The Inquisition was staffed by people who thought they were saving souls. Stalin's purges were carried out by loyal communists trying to build a perfect society. Modern authoritarian movements attract true believers who think they're protecting their country. The more righteous you feel, the more dangerous your actions can become. So when you feel that wave of moral certainty, when you're sure you're fighting evil, stop and check yourself. That's the moment you need to ask, am I really doing good, or just justifying harm because it serves my cause? So let's bring this closer to home. The truth is, we're not just living inside harmful systems, we're often maintaining them, even while convincing ourselves we're not. And this isn't because we're bad people. It's because we're busy, distracted, trying to get by. We tell ourselves it's someone else's responsibility, that we're too small to make a difference, that we don't have a choice. But those stories let systems run on autopilot. Take your relationship with technology. Maybe you criticize social media. You know it damages attention spans, polarizes people, undermines democracy. But your clicks, your likes, your time spent scrolling, That's the data that fuels the algorithms. That's what makes surveillance capitalism profitable. You might not build the platform, but you help it thrive. Your smartphone. It relies on rare earth minerals mined through environmental destruction and exploited labor. Your streaming service? It may be pushing conspiracy theories and extremist content to maximize engagement. You're not the villain, but you are part of the system. Or look at economics. Your retirement fund likely includes stocks from companies whose practices go against your values. Your tax dollars fund policies you might protest. Your shopping habits support supply chains tied to wage theft, child labor, or unsafe working conditions. Even when you try to shop ethically, the reality is you're embedded in systems that are nearly impossible to escape entirely. Psychologists call this the bystander effect. The more people involved, the easier it is to assume someone else will step up, that someone else will call it out, that someone else will take the fall. And Albert Bandura's work on moral disengagement shows just how skilled we are at separating our values from our actions. We use euphemisms, we blame the system, we minimize harm, we downplay the humanity of those affected. But the solution isn't despair, it's engagement. You don't have to be perfect. You can't be perfect, but you can be aware. You can take steps to reduce harm. You can reclaim your moral agency, even inside flawed systems. Some people choose harm reduction, doing what they can to minimize damage. Others lean into what Bandura called moral agency, finding specific areas where they can act meaningfully, despite the system around them. It's not about guilt. It's about responsibility, and clarity, and action. So, what roles are you playing without questioning them? How many things have you accepted as just how it works without really looking? Because if you want to resist complicity, research suggests 4 key areas to focus on: cognitive, behavioral, social, and institutional strategies. First, cognitive strategies. How you think. Start by reframing questions. When you're asked to do something questionable, ask, would I be okay with this if it were happening to someone I love? That question cuts through corporate language, policy justifications, and professional detachment. It brings human impact to the front. Next, trace the chain of consequences. The data analyst isn't just working with numbers. Their analysis might help decide who gets housing, or healthcare, or justice. That connection matters. Also, compare your stated values to your actual behavior. Not to feel bad, but to stay honest. And here's a powerful question to ask yourself regularly. What would I need to believe to justify this? Then follow it with, would I be okay with this decision being on the front page of tomorrow's news? That's how you break through rationalizations. Next up, behavioral practices, how you act. Think of this like training your moral reflexes. Practice saying no in low-stakes situations. The cashier who refuses to bend return policies is building the same psychological muscle they'll need when facing bigger pressures later. Mentally rehearse hard scenarios. Picture yourself being pressured to lie, to stay silent, to go along. What would you say? How would you stand firm? Write it down. Practice it out loud. And set hard lines, personal rules you won't break. Share them with trusted friends who can keep you accountable when it really matters. Third, social strategies, who you surround yourself with. Moral resistance is easier when you're not alone. Seek out people who share your values. Build quiet support networks, even inside difficult systems. One ally can make the difference between staying silent and speaking up. And when others take a stand, back them up. Support whistleblowers. Defend colleagues who raise uncomfortable truths. Create a culture where courage is seen and supported. And finally, institutional strategies, how you prepare to act. This is about playing the long game. Keep records. If you witness wrongdoing, document it. It may not be useful now, but it could matter later. Know your rights. Look up whistleblower protections, ethics hotlines, advocacy groups. Before you need them. and maintain your freedom. Keep your finances, skills, and networks flexible enough that you can walk away if something crosses your line. Don't let yourself become completely dependent on a system you can't live with. None of this is about moral perfection. It's about building what psychologists call moral resilience, the ability to hold on to your values even when the system pushes back. To keep showing up, keep thinking, keep caring, even when it's hard. Because in every era, in every harmful system, there have been people who chose to resist, and you can be one of them. Throughout history, in every place and time where harm flourished, some people found ways to resist. And it didn't start with grand gestures. It started with small decisions. During the Holocaust, people like Oskar Schindler and Raoul Wallenberg saved lives, not because they were superheroes, but because they made a different choice when it counted. During slavery, people risked everything to run the Underground Railroad. During segregation, civil rights workers endured arrests and violence just to demand fairness. Most of these people didn't wake up expecting to be heroes. They were regular people, teachers, clerks, clergy, neighbors, who had practiced living by their values long before they were tested. And when the moment came, they didn't flinch. You're in the same position right now. Every single day, you're presented with moments, quiet, ordinary moments, where your integrity is tested. When your boss pressures you to cut corners. When your friends normalize behavior that doesn't sit right with you. When you see something unjust and feel that urge to look away. Those are your tests. And you don't have to wait for some big dramatic crisis. Because moral courage doesn't start there, it starts here. Start small. Practice questioning what others take for granted. Get used to discomfort. Surround yourself with people who value honesty more than popularity. Build buffers, emotional, financial, and social, that allow you to walk away from situations that cross your boundaries. It could look like this: the quiet woman in a team meeting who raises her hand and says, "Have we considered how this will affect the local community?" The accountant who notices irregularities and starts documenting them, even when told to ignore it. The teacher who refuses to fudge grades because a student is well connected. The nurse who reports unsafe conditions, even though it could cause blowback. These acts may not make headlines, but they are the foundation of moral agency. They are the daily reps that prepare you for the bigger moments when they come. Because here's the truth: you are not alone in wanting to live with integrity. Millions of people feel the same tension. They wrestle quietly with the same fears, and finding them, and being one of them, is itself a powerful form of resistance. History only remembers the big moments. But behind every big act of courage are 1,000 small ones no one sees. What you do when no one's watching, that's what determines who you'll be when everyone is. And the uncomfortable truths we've explored in this video, they're not meant to leave you frozen with guilt. They're meant to wake you up. Yes, you're vulnerable to the same psychological forces that shaped the Milgram experiment and the Ash conformity study. Yes, you're embedded in systems that are far from perfect. Yes, you'll feel pressure to go along rather than stand apart. But you also have power. You have the capacity to recognize those pressures, to pause and reflect, to choose your response even when it's hard, to build the strength to say no, one small act at a time. You can develop moral courage. You can connect with others who value truth over comfort. You can become the kind of person who bends systems, however slowly, toward justice. And the choice isn't between being perfect or being a failure. It's between being conscious or unconscious, between exercising moral agency or letting others make your ethical choices for you. Because evil doesn't need fanatics. It just needs people who are too tired to think, too distracted to notice, too afraid to speak up. But that can change. You can reclaim responsibility. You can examine the rationalizations. You can narrow the gap between your ideals and your actions. And when you do, you become part of something bigger. You become one of the people who resist. One of the people who slow down the machinery, who ask uncomfortable questions, who hold the line when no one else will. So ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to become? What kind of world do I want to help build? And what am I doing today to align my actions with my values? Because it doesn't start later. It starts now. It starts with what you choose to do next.